Online student, please confirm I am audible. Please type yes or no. Thank you.
Online students, please confirm you can hear me all right. Good afternoon, friends. Friends, please settle down. Please settle down, friends. Please close your eyes for a moment. So a very, very quick recap. We had discussed the agrarian social structure, yeah, in the last lecture. So Beti, can you tell me? Did not revise? Beti? Yes? ठीक है. And what does Bete say, brother? Technological arrangements and the social arrangements. What do they mean?
Technological arrangement means like geography, rain and tractors,
Correct.
economic infrastructures, and social arrangement means land ownership, relationship between landlord and tenant.
ठीक है. And land holding patterns and all that. Good. Then what is the classification given? Please look up, guys. Look up. Everybody. Yes, Beti. Tell me, what is the classification of Daniel Thorner? Yes? Not you. I'm asking you. Yes. Absent. Beti? Yes? Daniel Thorner's classification. Malik, Kisan, and Mazdoor. Your neighbor. Elaborate on these three. Who are Maliks, who are Kisans, who are Mazdoors? Those with modest sized land holdings, right? No. Maliks have large land holdings. They're also oftentimes absentee landlords. Okay? Who has modest sized land holdings amongst these three? The Kisans, absolutely. So Kisans are the cultivators, the enterprising kind of guys. Huh? And who are Mazdoors? Sorry? The laborers, absolutely. The landless laborers are the Mazdoors. Fine. Then what else did we discuss, Beti? Beti, your neighbor? Lakshmi Narayan and Tyagi discussed how many types of tenancy arrangements? 4. Which are what? Crop sharing tenants? Brother? Beti? Those who pay cash rent? Unspecified? Very good. Paying fixed amount of produce as rent. ठीक है. Then we discussed what? Cooperatives. So very quickly on cooperatives, Beti. Democratically controlled by its members.
And each member has one vote.
Yes.
These cooperatives are jointly managed in their economic activities.
ठीक है. So jointly managing economic activities, people pool their resources, etc. Give me examples of some successful cooperatives.
Like the sugar mill industry in Maharashtra or the milk cooperatives in Gujarat,
Milk in Gujarat, sugar in Maharashtra.
Kerala and tea cultivation.
Great. Fisheries in Kerala and so on and so forth. Then we also discuss some analysis.
Yes, sir. Sir, P.R. Dubashi said that they are not just cooperatives, they are movements rather. And
Why?
sir, because they bring changes in the existing system.
So because they keep changing, they kind of respond to the changing needs of their members. ठीक है. So when the members need credit, then the movement would focus on credit, this thing. When the members need marketing facilities, the cooperative would focus on marketing skills and programs and so on. Fine. ठीक है. What else, Beti?
So Daniel Thorner criticized the system as it is hijacked by the superior richer class of the society.
Yes, so the cooperatives have been hijacked by the rich. Please look up. Brother, tell me about the community development program, your neighbor. 1950s. What was it first? What was it? To modernize villages, and like what all components, if you could elaborate? What all did it entail? Education, farming, irrigation. You're right. Whatever words come to your mind now related to rural India, they'll probably fit into this CDP, this thing. Huh? Okay. And why did the approach fail, brother? Yes? Over bureaucratization, lack of people's participation. Sorry? Lack of training and skill. Sorry? Confusing role allocation, etc. ठीक है, good. Then we went on to discuss factionalism. Very, very quickly, Betty. Factionalism.
So it was the strife and conflicts in the villages
हाँ.
that the community used to form.
Who studied a North Indian village? Factionalism in a North Indian village? Oscar Lewis. What does Lewis say? What are the causes of factionalism? Quickly. Inheritance, adoption of male child. Betty, continue. Continue, brother. Yes. Sexual assaults, etc. Caste based, it could be. ठीक है, good. Then we discussed farmers' movements. Who considered, Betty, who considered the Indian peasantry to be docile, lacking a revolutionary potential? Who talks about that? Brother? Barrington Moore Jr. He says Indian peasantry is docile and incapable of revolt. But then there are other scholars who say otherwise. Who? Who say कि it is not docile? Who say it is not docile? Kathleen Gough, Desai, Ranjit Guha, so many. ठीक है. Acha. Guys, I just want to give you a context, okay, regarding these peasant movements and, rebellions. In academia, okay, during 1950s and 60s, peasant uprisings, movements, etc. were not a major area of investigation. Peasant movements, rebellions, etc. did not receive a lot of academic attention during the first 2 decades after independence. Reason being, firstly, friends, the Gandhian view was kind of dominant. Gandhian view, which emphasized on villages being characterized by harmony, cooperation, interdependence, right? I repeat, 1950s and 60s, agrarian unrest did not receive much academic attention. A, because the Gandhian view was dominant. Secondly, in the academic field of sociology and anthropology, structural functional approach was the dominant approach during these years. Structural functional approach, how they understood क्या नाम है तुम्हारा, society, they also saw it largely in a positive light, based on cooperation, consensus, harmony. In other words, friends, during these first 2 decades of 50s and 60s, the overall emphasis was on cooperation, interdependence and harmony within the village. So, the conflicts, exploitation, struggles, etc. were somewhat ignored. Okay? However, by 1970s, agrarian unrest began late 1960s, and then fully during 70s, agrarian unrest started receiving adequate academic attention. Okay, so peasant movements began to be studied academically from late 60s and 70s onwards. And why? Why did, academic interest in peasant movements and uprisings increase? Due to various factors. Firstly, the Gandhian view got replaced by the which view? Ambedkarite view. Ambedkar's view highlighted conflict, exploitation, oppression in rural India. There are several seats in the front also. Those who can't find at the back, you're welcome. Okay, so Gandhian view was getting replaced by the Ambedkarite view. Secondly, there was increasing disillusion with the national leadership. The national leadership had made very tall promises regarding rural development, but the situation on the ground remained, leaving much to be desired. So there was not actual improvement which the national leadership was promising in the villages. Thirdly, with the green revolution having begun, Indian agriculture was rapidly transforming into capitalist type. Okay? Another reason being that in Latin America there were several peasant rebellions. So that also drew international academic attention to, agrarian unrest, right? But what was the single most biggest factor that drew the attention of Indian academics, not just the academics but the Indian state, media, to agrarian unrest? Think of the political, social climate of that time, late 1960s and early 70s. What could have triggered almost immediately an interest into agrarian unrest? There was education. Inflation, no, not so much, brother. So, no, it was not so much driven by the Cold War, though it had its own impact. Brother? In? हाँ क्यूबा ठीक है मतलब ठीक है ना but it's distant, something more immediate, more pressing and more home. Brother? Beti? The Naxalbari uprising. It was an armed rebellion by the Indian peasantry that challenged the might of the Indian state. Right? So in late 1960s or in the second half of 1960s, you had the Naxalbari uprising, which kind of immediately, told the complacent Indian state, media, academia, that bhaiya, the peasantry is not shant, nor is it, happy or whatever. There's a lot of unrest in the Indian peasantry which needs to be addressed. तो हमने कहा अब हम ये पढ़ेंगे, ठीक है? उन्होंने काफी खून खराबा किया. So that is what served as a trigger. Right? Chaliye. So I just wanted to give you that kind of a background to peasant movement studies. So then coming back to our revision part, we had discussed peasant movements during the colonial period. Please look up, guys, at the back. Yes, raise your hand in the corner. Brother? Yes. Tell me about some of the peasant movements during the colonial period, your favorite ones. Indigo. Kya, kahan? Just very briefly, one line. हाँ. And what time period are we talking? हाँ, ठीक है. And guys, in case you are not too sure whether it's 1859 or 74, then you can say 19th century. Yeah, even that will do. Okay. But if you are very confident, if you know it is for a fact ki bhaiya 1859, then you say 1859 or you write 1859. ठीक है. Great. What other movements? Beti, raise your hand. Yes. Pabna Agrarian Leagues. ठीक है, चलेगा. बेटी? Which movement? Eka movement. Great. What does Eka mean? Unity. Beti? Deccan riots. Where? In the Deccan, of course. हाँ. And who were the money lenders? They were Gujaratis and Marwadis who were seen as outsiders. Haan. And the government also then passed some Rayot Relief Act or something of the sort. Haan. ठीक है, great. What is... what else? Tell me, Mopla rebellion. Hindu landlords. You know how Atyacharis Hindus are, So, what happened because of it? What was the nature of the movement? Violent थी, peaceful थी, सत्याग्रह based थी, violent थी, है ना? ठीक है. And what is Beti? No, not Beti. Beti. Yes, you. Raise your hand. Yes. Give me some Gandhian movements along with Dhanagare's analysis of them. हाँ, वेरी गुड, वेरी गुड. ठीक है, अब चलते हैं आगे. Let us now discuss the peasant movements around the time of independence and after. And of course, friends, the ones which we are discussing, they are only, kind of in the nature of examples. It's not a comprehensive list, of course. Yeah. One was the Tebhaga movement. This was in Bengal in 1946-47. So, the landowners were the Jotedars. Landowners were the Jotedars, and the sharecroppers were the Bargadars. Okay? Again, it was a feudal exploitative system, high blah blah. Now, what the system that was prevalent was that the Bargadars would share half of their produce with the Jotedars. Bargadars were the sharecroppers, the guys who would grow the crop, and they had to share half of the produce with the Jotedars, whose lands they were growing the crop upon, right? So this movement, the Tebhaga movement, sought to ensure that the Bargadars pay only Tibhaga, or 1/3 of the produce, to the Jotedars. That is what they were demanding. They wanted to reduce the share of the landlords to 1/3. Okay. This movement was spearheaded by the which party? Communist Party of India. And the All India Kisan Sabha also had a role to play. The movement largely took place in 24 Parganas, 24 Parganas district, and saw participation by both the Hindu and Muslim peasantry in Bengal. Okay, Hindus and Muslims both participated. Also, the movement was seeking the implementation of the recommendations of the Flood Commission, FLOUD. Floud Commission was this thing, a land revenue commission established by the government, which had recommended in favor of the sharecroppers, the Bargadars. The government in Bengal that time was of the Muslim League. And they passed the Bargadari Act. The Bengal government, Muslim League government, passed the Bargadari Act, which limited the landlord's share of the harvest to 1/3. ठीक है. Another was the Telangana rebellion. Telangana rebellion was during 1946 to 1951. Where? Very difficult. Telangana. Yeah. Which was then a part of the princely state of Hyderabad. Nizam ruled state of Hyderabad. This is different from the Telangana movement for statehood, right? You need to make that distinction in your mind. We are talking about the Telangana rebellion by the peasantry. Okay, so Hyderabad was a feudal monarchy at the time. Land ownership was in the hands of Doras. In the Telangana region, there was excessive feudal exploitation of the local peasantry. It included practices of bonded labor and agricultural slavery. The Doras were supported by the Nizam. As well as the Razakars. Who are the Razakars? The armed militia, you know, who were apparently very ruthless and stuff. The rebels carried out guerrilla warfare and established parallel government in more than 4,000 villages in Telangana. More than 4,000 villages in Telangana came under the administration of the parallel government of the rebels. They were called Gram Rajyams. Okay. The movement basically got weakened after the action by the Indian state against the Nizam, okay, and the Razakars. During the movement, the Communist Party and organizations like the Andhra Conference, it was a literary forum, provided support to the movement. ठीक. Then you had the Naxalbari uprising. This is the fount of the Naxalite movement, which continues to be an important concern for our internal security to this day. Right? So what is this Naxalbari movement? The Naxalbari uprising, what do we know? Anything? People from Bengal or Naxalbari in particular, anybody? Anybody hails from here or near about? No one? You are? Okay, yeah. What is the, before you explain to us what Naxalbari was, what is the, should I say, public sentiment about the Naxalite movement or the Naxalbari uprising or its leaders like Majumdar, Sanyal, etc. amongst the educated youth in Bengal today, okay, like colleges, universities, school, how they viewed? Are they viewed as like revolutionaries, misguided, anti-national? How are they seen? Sorry? Huh? My question to you is, how do the Bengali youth, educated Bengali youth in schools, colleges and universities, at one point of time there was a lot of romanticization of the movement, right? It had very widespread sympathy. So is it still like that, particularly during periods of communist rule? Is it still like that? You've studied in Bengal? You haven't seen that kind of romanticization of the movement, huh? Acha, theek hai. Haan, now tell us please. Haan. Ji. Which are the other importantly, states for the Naxalite movement which have where the Naxal movement has been strong, either contemporarily or historically? Chhattisgarh or Andhra, Jharkhand, huh? And Nepal border, bilkul. So, how many of us do kind of sympathize with the cause or whatever, if you're aware? It's okay, I mean, not too okay, but you won't be branded anti-national. We'll keep it a secret. Sorry? Kya? Be a bit more articulate, na? Clear. You may be designated an urban Naxal. One Odia friend she is talking about.
He said me if anybody entered into
Naxal areas.
means in this working like how they were.
If anybody interferes in their operations.
If he want to come out, means he can't do this. He had no any chance like उसको suicide ऐसे chances.
ठीक है. So there are several areas where Naxals की चलती है, हाँ, basically it's their word. आने नहीं देंगे. ठीक है. Thank you. So friends, the Naxalbari uprising, okay, as was rightly mentioned by our dear friend, it took place in the Naxalbari village. It's a very nondescript kind of a village in Bengal, okay, and of course, we've discussed ad nauseum that, oppression, etc. of the peasantry. Okay, so you had a very oppressive kind of glaring inequalities in the Naxalbari region as well. That's a given. But also appreciate what were the conditions which kind of led to this kind of armed uprising. It was a very audacious attempt by the peasantry. So, उनकी इतनी हिम्मत, bluntly put, to pick up arms against the might of the Indian state. So what was the context of that himmat of the peasantry? Internationally, friends, so there was an international context and a national context to that very local armed uprising. Internationally, in the Eastern Bloc, so that was the Cold War period, Eastern Bloc led by USSR, Western Bloc led by USA, right? In the Eastern Bloc, thanks to American moves, there was a very decisive historic split between two major countries of the Eastern Bloc, the USSR and China. These were two big, geographically, population-wise, and overall importance-wise. So there was this historic Sino-Soviet split in the communist movement globally. So there were differences of ideology, interpretation of Marxism, various things. And of course then USA wanted to weaken the communist bloc. Within the country, within India, there was consequently a split in the Indian communist movement. One faction of the Indian communists supporting USSR, another supporting China. The ones who were supporting China, okay, among them, now, so there were mainstream communist parties like CPI, CPIM, right? Among the China supporting ones, also appreciate there was a war between India and China in 1962, if I remember correctly, right? And China had acquired Indian territory. So that drew a section of Indian communists away from China. That how do you justify, aggression by China on Indian soil? But the section of Indian communists who remained committed to China, okay, they, from within them, now they were also mainstream politicians, but from within them there was this extreme left section of militant communists. Now what happened during about that time, this movement began in 1967 not. Around that time, the communists came to power in Bengal. Earlier, Bengal was ruled by the Congress party. Okay? Around the time of the uprising, the communists came to power in Bengal. So there were very high hopes amongst their cadre that the communists would implement land reforms, etc. very truly, because they are ideologically committed. But soon after, a very extreme left militant section from within the communist movement, mainstream communist movement, they became disillusioned with the communist parties also. They became disillusioned with the mainstream communist parties also. Matlab, they started seeing the mainstream communist parties as betraying the Marxist cause. Or particularly the communist cause. They accused them. See, there were leaders like Charu Majumdar and Kanu Sanyal. These were the ideologues of the Naxalbari uprising. So Charu Majumdar authored some documents, historic documents, 8 documents, which laid down the foundation of the ideology of the Naxalbari movement. These guys basically argued that power flows from the barrel of the gun. As per who? Mao. So following Mao Zedong, they advocated an armed uprising against the Indian state. Charu Majumdar's own life story is very interesting. He was born in a very filthy rich family. Filthy rich. Landowning family. And then he got attracted to the communist ideals, etc. इनकी story को बोलते हैं riches to rags story. Like you may have heard the phrase rags to riches. You know how somebody born in extreme poverty makes it big in life. इनकी riches to rags है. So he dedicated all his personal wealth to the cause of the movement. So these guys basically advocated an armed uprising against the Indian state. They accused the mainstream communist parties. Mainstream matlab those who participate in elections and the mainstream political system we have, which is of electoral democracy. The CPI, the CPIM, these are the mainstream parties. So their leadership was accused of being revisionist by the Naxalbari ideologues. Revisionism क्या होता है या revisionist का मतलब क्या होता है? It means that these people revise the fundamental ideology of the communist movement as laid down by a Marx or a Mao. Revise matlab in a negative sense. They basically compromise with the ideology, or bluntly put, they betray the ideology. Particularly, they shake hands with the rich and the powerful. ठीक है? Basically, they said कि कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी भी जब पावर में आ गई, फिर वो भी कांग्रेस जैसे हो गए. They are not bringing about effective change, economic democracy or equality. They are also favoring the interests of the rich, the landed classes. The Naxal ideology advocated total change, complete change. And to bring about total या complete change, what is required is an annihilation of the class enemy. And how do you annihilate them? Physically. Okay? By physical attacks, violence, and seize the productive forces. So the Naxal rebels, they would grab the land documents, ownership documents, etc. Kabza karo the properties, lands, houses, shops of the landowning sections of the society. They basically championed the establishment of a people's government through an armed uprising. Why not take the electoral route? So they believe that whoever comes to power through the electoral route, right, they will basically end up serving the interests of the haves, the rich and the powerful. Electoral democracy is a sham, right? So government was always suspect. The democratically elected government was seen with suspicion as an ally of the haves. In fact, the Naxal rebels also attacked symbols of state authority, like police stations, okay? Government offices, buildings. Now the rebellion was, this armed rebellion, okay, was crushed by the Indian state. Akash? May I? Dhanagare analyzes the reasons how this movement, this armed uprising could be crushed in a relatively short span of time by the Indian state. Thank you. Why? Why do you think the movement was unable to, establish its own government, overthrowing the democratically elected government? Why? What is your assessment, particularly Bengalis, since it happened in your part of the country? Why didn't the Naxals, why weren't the rebels able to do what they set out to do? Beti?
Sir, they were not strong in front of the Indian state.
Strong in what sense?
Physically, they are
Militarily. Let's say militarily. Very correct.
and as in China, there was unity, but in unity in the sense of they have same communities. But in India, there is a lot of diversity about castes and languages, so they are unable to unite in
Chalo.
the sense that as in China.
ठीक है. So there are several reasons which can be identified for the reason why this armed uprising was crushed. Okay. A. The leaders, the leadership of the movement overestimated the support for an armed uprising amongst the masses. They overestimated the extent of public support for an armed rebellion, right? So they thought, गांव वाले हैं, बहुत परेशान हैं, गरीब हैं, पिस रहे हैं, हम बोलेंगे चलो बंदूक वगैरह से मारते हैं, वो कहेंगे हाँ मारते हैं. But that didn't happen. People were more concerned with the daily grind of how to secure their next meal. Secondly, there was a massive gap in the military capabilities of the two sides, right? Two sides matlab the Naxals and the Indian state. Naxals, friends, the rebels, they literally were, would end up fighting with bows and arrows, slings, such kind of primitive weaponry against the Indian state, which was armed with technologically far more advanced military equipment, right? Simply put, the Naxals were militarily grossly underprepared to take on the Indian state. Thirdly, the leadership of the rebels also underestimated the ruthlessness with which the Indian state will clamp down on the movement. The rebels underestimated the ruthlessness with which the Indian state will respond. So, oftentimes governments in general are quite hesitant to use very overtly excessive physical force against rebels within. It's not just in India, globally, right? You may use force very ruthlessly against external, terrorists or whoever. But against one's own people, typically or oftentimes states are reluctant. Why? Because, the thinking is, apne hi bacche who've gone astray or whatever, But the Indian state said ki bacche kuch nahi hai. And it was very heavy-handed in its response. It was a purely military kind of a clamp down on the rebels with all the might of the Indian state. Okay, it came down very heavily on the Naxal rebels. And Bengal mein to kya tha? Party bhi unhi ki thi. They were literally members of the ruling party. And then they were the most extreme sections, and then they were this thing. एक सिलीगुड़ी ग्रुप करके कहते थे, सिलीगुड़ी में पड़ता है ये, हाँ. So then they were discarded from the party and all, but they were originally members of that same ideology, the ruling ideology and party. So they underestimated. Okay. The Indian state was so ruthless. This Majumdar fellow, he died in prison. Okay, the government claimed he died of heart attack or something, but they believe that he has been eliminated by the Indian state. Kanu Sanyal, of course, he committed suicide many years later. Like many years later. So ye hai. And why did they go so wrong on so many fronts? The underlying reason, okay, was the difference in the social background of the leadership and the people they claim to represent. Differences in social background. The Naxal leadership failed to assess the situation correctly. Yeah. Partly because of the differences in social background of the leadership and the people. साफ बात है, मजुमदार साहब बहुत ही privileged background से आते थे. Are you with me? The people who were suffering on the ground, they were from the lower castes, landless, rural poor, tribals. So when you don't belong to that stratum or section of society, right, it is difficult to understand their point of view, their thinking patterns, their concerns, their pressing concerns, their everything. Are you with me? तो ये फर्क था. So can we dub the movement a complete failure? Clearly not. So the movement was clamped down upon militarily, but to its, I hesitate to use the word credit, okay, but to its this thing, the movement did bring to the forefront of public discourse nationally the plight of the peasantry. It was able to successfully highlight the plight of the peasantry, forcing Indian media, intelligentsia, academia and the state to take notice. It also led to a political awakening of sorts of the peasantry. It arose the political consciousness of the Indian peasantry, not just in Naxalbari, that nondescript village, but the country as a whole. Over subsequent decades, the movement spread beyond Naxalbari, beyond Bengal. Yes or no? There was a whole red corridor running through several states. So large parts of the country, I don't know how much, 30% या कितना कहते थे, एक time पे था, affected by the Naxalite movement. Dr. Manmohan Singh, as Prime Minister, had termed the Naxalite movement as the gravest internal security threat to the country. In present times also, those who support the or try to become the voice of the underprivileged are termed as urban Naxals, Naxal sympathizers. Yes or no? Indicating what? That the cause or its ideology does find resonance in a large section of the intelligentsia. You know, people who have wide influence through their writings and speeches, teachers, writers, journalists, media persons. चलिए आगे. Now discussing what are termed as new farmers' movements. New farmers' movements. In all the, what we discussed today, all those movements, you will notice how they were very particularly different from the colonial period, earlier, the ones which we had discussed yesterday. Today's discussed movements till now, they were basically far more under the control of the communists, not the Congress. In the colonial era, there was a strong Gandhian influence. Chaliye. So there was also a greater use of violence in these movements, while Gandhian were decidedly non-violent. Now coming to the new farmers' movements. These are certain farmers' movements which took place in 1970s and 80s. 1970s and 80s. In different parts of the country, you had what are termed as new farmers' movements. Firstly, you tell me, what does this phrase seem to indicate? Does it refer to new farmers' movements? Yeah, new farmers' movements. The first one, new farmers' movements, meaning किसानों की नई जंगें, jungs, okay, whatever, नए संघर्ष. और the second one means नए किसानों के संघर्ष. So are we what is the new? Is it the farmers who are new or the movements which are new? Huh? The farmers were new. Okay? So it was new farmers movements, the second one. Let us see how these were new, okay, or different from the previous ones, what we've discussed till now. So 1970s and 80s, friends, this period saw a large number of farmers' protests, agitations, spearheaded by some very, there was a growing assertiveness by some farmers' organizations, such as the Bharatiya Kisan Union, have we heard of this? Led by who? Mahendra Singh Tikait, right? Where, matlab, main gad inka, epicenter of their power, Western UP. Yeah. You had the Shetkari Sangathan. Where? Maharashtra, led by who? Sharad Joshi. You had the Tamil Nadu Agriculturists Association. Guess where? In Assam. Nahi. Of course in Tamil Nadu. Okay. Spearheaded by Narayan Swami Naidu. कोई लिख मत देना for God's sake, हाँ असम की सर आपने बोला था. It was in jest. The Karnataka Rajya Ryot Sangh. Led by M.D. Nanjunda Swami. M.D. M for mother, D for Delhi. M.D. Nanjunda Swami. Forget, the name is not too important anyways. Okay? Now these guys, these were the movements, protests, agitations by new farmers. How were they new? Let us try to appreciate. These were basically farmers who belonged to dominant castes. they were the beneficiaries of the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution had created a class of capitalist farmers. Okay? And it was these organizations basically represented their interests, were controlled by them, these capitalist farmers. Okay? The new farmers' movements were supported by which strata of the agrarian class structure, or which segment of the rural society? By all classes. Dhanagare says the new farmers movements received the support of all segments of rural society, all classes. So they did receive the support of the big farmers, but also middle-sized landholding wale, even small and marginal farmers, even the laborers. Everybody's support was mobilized by these movements. Then why do we say that these movements are of the capitalist farmers? Dhanagare says if we analyze the nature of demands that they made, if we analyze whose class interest these movements served, we can then identify their class character, or if we see the nature of demands made by these movements, we'll be able to appreciate that they were basically promoting the class interests of the big farmers. So their demands, one persistent demand was higher and higher minimum support price. That was a recurrent demand. So for different crops, kabhi cotton, kabhi sugar cane, they demanded subsidized inputs. कि free electricity दो, free ये दो, water bill हटा दो. Waiver of loans. Now, are these big farmers' concerns? High MSP, doesn't it benefit all farmers? See, basically, whom does high MSP benefit? Those who have marketable produce or extra to sell. Those who are growing enough quantity which can be sold, they will benefit. And who was growing large quantities? The big farmers. So, high MSP would basically benefit the large farmers, those who had large land holdings. Are you with me? So these movements primarily served the class interests of the big farmers. But they were able to mobilize all sections of rural society, all classes, all agrarian classes. How? For that, in order to mobilize, may I continue or slow down? Slow down. Okay. May I? Yeah. So, in order to mobilize all sections of the rural society, the leaders of these movements, what do you do? If you want to mobilize a large number of diverse people, how do you do that? How do you unite them? You give them a common enemy. हिंदुओं को यूनाइट करना है तो क्या करो? मुसलमान को डिमोनाइज कर दो. Are you with me? So who was the common enemy in this case? नहीं, state नहीं. State was not the enemy. They coined the very famous slogan, now very commonly used, India versus Bharat. Bharat referring to the countryside, rural India, and India referring to urban areas. So the city was projected as the common enemy of the villagers in order to mobilize all sections of the rural society. शरद जोशी जी ने ये किया था, हाँ? India versus Bharat. Why is the city the enemy? Basically, it was the argument which was developed कि जो political system है, administration है, it is dominated by city dwellers. So all policies, programs of the government benefit city dwellers, urban areas, urban growth पे सरकार focus करती है. Rural areas are neglected. Civil services में कौन भरे हुए हैं? City dwellers. गांव के बच्चे नहीं लिए जाते. Are you with me? There was this very landmark agitation by the Bharatiya Kisan Union in Delhi. Late 1980s, Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister. And he had got a very resounding kind of mandate, sympathy vote after the assassination of Indira Gandhi. So he was a very strong, young, dynamic kind of seen as that kind of a Prime Minister. Right? And then you had farmers from western UP camping in Delhi with tractors and bullock carts, bringing literally, and in Lutyens, Delhi, so bringing literally the central administration to a grinding halt. ठीक है? उनको पता नहीं है इनसे करें क्या, सारे ताऊ आके बैठ गए. ठीक है? बुलक कार्ट्स में, ट्रैक्टर्स में, एटसेट्रा. कहते हैं उस टाइम टिकैत ने राजीव गांधी को कहते हैं लोहे के चने चबा दिए, समथिंग ऑफ दैट सॉर्ट. Basically, they came out with a charter of 30 plus demands, and the Rajiv Gandhi government was forced to accept all of them. So that was the time when the metal or the shakti of the farmers, of these capitalist farmers, big farmers, those who had been the beneficiaries of green revolution, that became apparent to the nation, the government in particular, but also to the nation as a whole. Okay? In order to press their demands, these new farmers' movements used what kind of methods? Violent or non-violent to begin with? What kind of methods? Violent or non-violent? Clearly non-violent. In fact, Gandhian methods were used by the new farmers' movements. a variety of means like rail roko, rasta roko, chakka jam. Okay, so basically bringing the city or routine life to a grinding halt. Huh? Why not violent? I mean, these guys had the means, they were rich.
They will be arrested or crushed by the state.
So, one would be that the state will get an opportunity to crush the movement ruthlessly. Secondly, they did not want to delegitimize the state. They wanted to extract benefits from the state. That was the approach. वो ये नक्सल्स की तरह नहीं है, ये नहीं कहते ये सब फरेब है कि ये रिच की सरकार है, क्योंकि वो खुद ही रिच है. ठीक है. They are saying स्टेट हमारे साथ तो ना इंसाफी कर रही है, कम दे रही है, और दो. ठीक है. इतना एमएसपी में नहीं पड़ता खाता, बढ़ा दो. So the approach was to extract more and more benefits, pressure the state to extract greater benefits, not to delegitimize or challenge the authority of the state. Clear? Moving on. Or you want your break? Breako then. online friends, please confirm that you can see me and hear me correctly. Thank you. Please settle down. Let's continue. Friends, kindly settle down. चलें आगे. Guys, settle down, yeah. चलिए, moving on. To the current spate of, what will it take? The current spate of farmers' protests, the recent ones. Current matlab recent. We all know what happened, right? How many of us are aware? Just raise your hands. We're all aware of what we are talking, right? Modi government time recently, like last 2 years, we've seen farmers. Just raise your hands. I just want to be sure that we're all in the know broadly. Yeah, fine. So, I just want a quick verdict. How many of you think the farmers erred in having the acts, undone? कि farmers ने गलती की, the acts were in their interest and should have remained, and the farmers were whatever misguided, ya anti-national, ya khalistani. But how many of you think that the were supportive of the farmers' agitations? Raise your hands. Farmers ने सही किया, उनका नुकसान होता. अरे, you did both, you can't do that. How many of you are supportive of the farmers, particularly those from farming backgrounds? How many of you think that the farmer protests were legitimate and they expressed legitimate concerns, the bills would have harmed the farmers broadly? None. Do you think farmers were correct in doing what they did? To a fair extent, they were justified, you're suggesting. How many of us think that they were misguided and they उन्होंने अपने पाँव पे कुल्हाड़ी मार ली, they harmed their own interests? ठीक है. And the rest are kind of menu ki, what's to me. ठीक है. Either ways it's okay or ठीक है. चलिए, so let us try to appreciate what these acts were and what were the protests. So the Modi government passed 3 acts. First in the form of an ordinance, and later on these were in the nature of bills passed by the parliament, right? These were the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act 2020, very, very briefly, I'll tell you what these acts also sought to do. So, then you had the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act of 2020. And the Essential Commodities Amendment Act of 2020. The first of these, friends, it basically enabled farmers to sell agricultural produce outside the APMC mandis. The second basically provided a framework for contract farming, facilitated contract farming. The third removed certain agricultural commodities from the list of essential commodities. Some agricultural items were removed from the list of essential commodities like potatoes, pulses. Okay? Certain oils and cereals. These were removed from the list of essential commodities. These were the three acts. We'll try to appreciate what was the government's viewpoint or stance regarding these acts and what was the concerns expressed by the protesting farmers. The proponents of these legislations, which was the ruling party, the government, of course, they argued that these acts will revolutionize Indian farming. Together they will, thanks a lot, beta, revolutionize Indian farming. They will free Indian agriculture from governmental control and excessive interference. These bills will enable acts, or these acts will enable farmers to receive higher farm gate prices. Higher farm gate prices. Farm gate prices matlab for the, the price for their produce at their own farm gate. It will enable farmers to receive higher farm gate prices. It will increase competition for the farmers' produce. So farmers will get a higher price for their products. And also, removing them from the list of essential commodities will enable farmers to benefit from any price rise in that item, right? So farmers will have higher profits. All in all, the government hailed these legislations as path-breaking and something akin to the 1991 LPG reforms. What they had done for Indian industry, these bills would do to Indian agriculture. Okay? However, friends, these bills evoked a very strong reaction from several farmers' groups and organizations across the country, particularly in the states of Punjab and Haryana. various farmers organizations, including the All India Kisan Sabha, Bharatiya Kisan Union, many others, they came under the banner of All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee. All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee. Yeah, that became like an apex body representing farmers' interests in various farmers' organizations. The movement was also supported by several other sections of the civil society. Human rights activists, tumhare feminists, all of them. Okay? People like Nivedita Menon, Yogendra Yadav. Okay? There was this, again, a pan-India alliance of civil society groups called the National Alliance for People's Movements. They also supported. National Alliance for People's Movements. Don't talk. Bachcho, please don't talk. What if you've missed something, you fill that up later. Or silently from your neighbor or later. Also, these moves were opposed by several mainstream political parties, including the Congress Party, the Aam Aadmi Party, the Akali Dal, very importantly, Shiv Sena. You know, Akali and Shiv Sena, conventionally they've been close to the BJP. The communist parties, of course. Okay? The protesting farmers resorted to a variety of methods. Such as Bharat Bandh, Rail Roko, Rasta Roko, Delhi Chalo, marches to Delhi. You know, there was these images of the Delhi police firing water cannons, just lest I be, taken wrongly, using water cannons against the protesting farmers. Blocking the, access roads to Delhi, Singhu border pe idhar udhar. Kisan marches and parades. All such things were used by the protesting farmers. The government response to the farmers' protests for a long period of time was to not give in to their demands. So the government seemed for a long time very steadfast in its resolve to persist, go ahead with these legislative changes. The government offered to suspend the farm laws for 18 months and used water cannons on protesting farmers, tried to deny entry to the farmers into the capital city, etc. Now, what were the concerns expressed by the farmers? Let us try to appreciate. Why the farmers opposed these bills? So these, I keep calling them bills, but they were then acts. Okay, their farm bill protests because the protest began when they were bills. Yeah, and so the farmers' concerns were that these changes will basically make APMC mandis. It will reduce the importance of the APMC mandis to the point that eventually the mandis will become redundant. The APMC mandis will become redundant and they will be shut. And the farmers felt, their rationale was that farmers need more mandis, not fewer mandis, more options, right? Moreover, we don't need any national level legislation to enable farmers to sell outside the mandis. In many states, I think as many as 18 states, farmers were already selling outside the APMC mandis. Also, that the bills militate against the federal structure of the Indian Constitution. Since agriculture is largely a state subject. In fact, many state governments passed some sort of resolutions in legislature against the bills, the central bills. It was argued that these are state subjects and the central government is thereby diluting the federal nature of our polity. These bills will lead to a corporatization of Indian agriculture. It will make farmers vulnerable to exploitation by big corporates. Okay? So basically, when these contracts are entered into between these large corporates and farmers, these contracts are largely one-sided. Okay, corporates have big legal teams, deep pockets. Farmer is like a minion before these large corporates. It's like those terms and conditions we accept when we purchase somewhere anything online. You just tick, right? You don't read, you don't have the time, the resources to go through that agreement. It's like a one-sided agreement. So the corporates will basically compel farmers eventually to even part with their lands, or they'll become the de facto owners. If not the de jure owners, they'll become the de facto owners of the farmers' lands. You understand broadly what is contract farming? MNCs enter into contracts with farmers and farmers grow in accordance with the terms set in the contract. So say you are a Pepsi. So you want to make Lay's chips for which you need potatoes, right, which are for potato chips. So you will enter into contracts with the potato farmers that this much you will supply, this will be the quality, this is the process and everything. So you lose all autonomy. And the terms are so stringent. Initially you may get attracted to enter into the contracts because the terms offered are good. But later on, when the Adhatiyas who play an important role, when they are removed from this thing, okay, the farmers will have no option but to enter into these contracts. किसको फायदा होगा? प्रोवर्बियली अदानी अंबानी को, ठीक है. The Essential Commodities Act amendment, which removes certain items from the list of essential commodities, some agricultural items, it will benefit hoarders, not the farmers. Basically, it will encourage hoarding of agricultural produce, black marketing, and the subsequent price rise will benefit the hoarders and not the farmers. Okay? This is what has happened. Eventually, in a very, what came as a big surprise to most sections of the society, the farm bills were withdrawn by the Modi government. Right? The farmers literally sat through all seasons and all weathers, etc. Delhi ki kadakti thand or garmi or everything. Huh? And the Modi government seemed very unrelenting till they did relent. Huh? Sorry? Till the elections. Where? Elections where? UP elections. Huh? Okay? Now let us analyze these protests. From the eyes of, guess who? Which scholar? Scholars it is. Huh? No, not Dhanagare. I think he's dead. Okay? No, Desai should also be dead now. Srinivas is long dead. Current सोचो ना जीवित जो हैं, not Gupta ji. Who would be interested in Punjab and Sikhs and all? Jodhka, bilkul. Beginning with Surinder Singh Jodhka. So he helps us to understand why particularly farmers in Punjab have been so strident in their opposition to these acts. So Jodhka tells us, friends, that Green Revolution, okay, was particularly successful in Punjab. The Green Revolution was hugely successful in Punjab. And to give you an idea of the wealth that this revolution created in Punjab, Punjab occupies merely 1.5% of India's geographical area. Punjab occupies merely 1.5% of India's geographical area. Has merely 2.2% of India's total population. Merely 2.2% of India's total population. And only 2.7% of the total cultivable land in India. But it contributed 30 to 50%, 30 to 50% of the rice production. And 50 to 75% of the country's wheat production. ठीक है, between 1980 and 2010. So you can imagine how productive the Punjabi soil had become thanks to the Green Revolution. And Green Revolution, for the most part, was a state-led effort. It was a result of state policies. The success of the Green Revolution in Punjab was a result of government policies. You know, for example, rice was not conventionally grown in Punjab. Bhakra Nangal Dam, the water it supplied, made possible the growing of rice. So much so that it contributes, 50% of the total rice production in the country. But what also happened, friends? Firstly, Punjab farmers became some of the most indebted in the country. Punjabi farmers became amongst the most indebted in the country. And a lot of their credit needs were met by the arhatiyas, the middlemen. Lot of their credit needs were met by the arhatiyas or middlemen in the mandis. On the condition that farmers sell their produce to them. On the condition that the farmers sell their produce to them. Okay? So point is, friends, arhatiyas are very important to me. Not just as middlemen, but as credit providers. Absolutely. Right? And my credit needs are much more varied than merely the agriculture thing. Also appreciate by 1990s, okay, or with 1990s and the LPG reforms, now imported food grain became available at a lower price than the MSP. Imported food grain started becoming available at a lower price than the MSP. Globalization provides the context for us to understand the current spate of agrarian protests and unrest. Okay? So one is that you had imported food grains at lower price than the MSP available. Secondly, the share of agriculture in the GDP began to decline. So farmers started mattering less in the national economy and politics. The importance of farmers in the national economy and politics began to decline. So farmer politics weakened after the LPG reforms. And for a large number of Punjabi next generation born after the reforms, agriculture was not the preferred occupation. The post-1990s generation did not view agriculture favorably as an occupation. Point is, friends, that agriculture in India in general, Punjab in particular, has been under severe stress. Are you with me? Because of the changes brought about by LPG. And these bills seem to kind of, take forward the LPG agenda. Okay? Corporatizing and opening up, etc. And the government admittedly said it in as many words. That this will be the LPG for agriculture sector. But yeah, LPG has not been good to us. Coming to the three legislations, these were seen not only as an attack on their livelihood, but also an attack on their culture. It was seen an attack on their culture. Culturally, please appreciate, most Punjabi farmers are Sikhs, and rather proud Sikhs. They are very proud of their Sikhi identity. So they viewed themselves as very religious, hardworking, enterprising Sikh farmers, entrepreneurs. Yeah? They saw themselves as industrious, enterprising, religious Sikh farmers. And it seemed as if the government is trying to turn them into wage laborers. So most of their meetings during these long drawn protests, they began with Sikh slogans and symbolism. ठीक है? So they saw it the bills as an attack on Sikhi, the Sikh culture or the Sikh identity, Sikhi, and Kisani, identity and culture. Meaning their identity and culture as Sikhs and as agriculturists, Kisans. They saw these bills as an attack on Sikhi identity and the Kisani identity. Clear? These bills for the farmers represented an alliance. For the farmers, these bills represented an alliance between corporate interests. These bills represented an alliance between corporate interests and an authoritarian state. ठीक है? The leaders of the farm protests belong to the landowning dominant castes. So that is what enabled them to continue the movement for so long. That is what enabled them to sustain the movement. They had the economic, social and political resources to sustain the movement. The leaders were almost all or predominantly from the Jat community, the dominant Jat, J-A-T-T, okay, Jat community. But they avoided making it a caste-based movement. They did not make it a movement only of the Jat Sikhs. Right? For that, they relied upon the inclusive idioms of Sikhism. They relied upon inclusive idioms of Sikhism and also celebrated Dalit icons like Ambedkar and Ravidas. ठीक है? Paramjeet Singh Judge, he points out, friends, that in the current model of development, please put your mobiles on silent. In the current model of development, agriculture has been clearly subordinated to manufacturing. Agriculture in Punjab is in crisis. Due to various factors we've discussed earlier as well. You know, whether it is depleting groundwater table, monoculture ki practice, lot of that, right? So Punjabi agriculture is in a state of crisis. And Punjabi farmers are literally surviving on MSP. MSP मतलब state support. हाँ, minimum support price तो है ही है. So these bills, they were formulated without any consultation with the main stakeholders, which is the farmers. So they raised fears that, it will lead to a dismantling of the MSP regime. And that is why such strident opposition. ठीक है? Ashish Nandi, says that the farmers' movement has taught the government a lesson. That in a democracy, it is the people's will which prevails ultimately. People's will eventually prevails in democracy. Indians are not passive citizens. Indians are not passive citizens. No matter how charismatic the national leadership is. So we won't be bedazzled by Modi ji's charms. ठीक है ना? We are very aware of our rights and concerns and articulate in expressing them. Neera Chandok says the farmers' protests were remarkable. They continued for more than a year, relentlessly. Despite deaths of their colleagues, she says comrades, despite deaths of their comrades and despite stigmatization, a perfectly legitimate movement was sought to be delegitimized by the government. By branding the protesters Khalistani, Pakistani, आंदोलनजीवी, एंटी नेशनल और न जाने क्या क्या. छोड़ो इसे सूथर को. निवेदिता मेनन points out that though Punjabi society is very patriarchal, women farmers have been leading this movement from the front. Women farmers will be significantly disadvantaged by these bills. which will adversely impact food security. And their power to negotiate in the market. ठीक है? चलो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.